The summer sun poured its golden light across the estate, casting long shadows of the towering hedges that lined the stone path. The mansion behind stood like a silent witness, its pillars white and immaculate, its doors carved with intricate designs that whispered of wealth and power. In the center of the path knelt a man with eyes full of quiet strength. His hands were steady as he adjusted the bandage on the young girl's leg, her crutch pressed against her side, her gaze fixed on him with the trust only a child could give. His name was Daniel. He wasn't meant to be here, at least, not in this part of the world. Once a soldier, he had left behind the noise of war to start over. He had thought he could vanish into simplicity, take odd jobs, and live without the ghosts of the past. But life never released him so easily. The girl, Emily, smiled faintly, trying not to show the pain that flickered across her face. She had been playing in the garden when she stumbled, the wound reopening from an old injury. Daniel had been passing by when he heard her cry. Without hesitation, he rushed to her, scooping her up with a tenderness that didn't match the ruggedness of his frame. Behind them, from the doorway of the mansion, stood a man in a dark tailored suit. His posture was sharp, his gaze colder than stone, though a flicker of something more complicated lingered in his eyes. Richard Hawthorne, Emily's father, the man whose empire stretched across continents, the man who trusted no one. Emily, Richard called softly, his voice controlled, but Daniel noticed how it trembled at the edges. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Daddy," Emily replied, her voice small but brave. She glanced at Daniel and added, "He helped me." Richard's eyes narrowed as they landed on Daniel. Strangers did not belong on his property, not when so many enemies lurked in the shadows of his business. And yet, something about this man's protective stance unsettled him, not in danger, but in recognition. Daniel rose slowly, his broad shoulders tense, his hands stained with a trace of Emily's blood from the scrape. "She'll be okay," he said, his voice steady, deep, yet gentle. "The wound's minor, but she needs to rest it." For a long moment, silence thickened the air. Richard studied him with the precision of a man who had spent his life in boardrooms and battlefields of money. He saw the strength, the quiet loyalty, the scars hidden not on the skin but in the soul. And it disturbed him more than he could admit. Emily, oblivious to the invisible currents of suspicion between the two men, clung to her crutch and smiled shyly at Daniel. "Thank you. Most people just ignore me when I fall." Daniel's heart twisted. He had seen children broken by wars, seen them cry with no one to comfort them. He couldn't ignore anyone in pain, especially not her. Richard finally stepped forward, his polished shoes tapping against the stone. "I don't know who you are," he said coldly, "but strangers don't wander onto this estate by chance." Daniel held his gaze, unflinching. "I'm not here by chance. I was passing through the village. When I heard her cry, I followed. That's all." Richard's jaw tightened. His instincts told him there was more to this man. No one just appeared like that. But Emily's eyes sparkled with a plea, a silent request that her father not send away the man who had helped her. Richard sighed, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "You should go," Richard said firmly to Daniel. But fate, as always, had other plans. It began subtly, a small invitation the next day when Emily insisted Daniel join her for tea in the garden. Richard, reluctant but unwilling to deny his daughter's fragile happiness, allowed it. What started as brief encounters grew longer, the silence between Daniel and Richard filled with tension, while the silence between Daniel and Emily filled with laughter and stories. But there was another presence, a woman. Her name was Evelyn, Richard's trusted confidant and business partner. Sharp as glass and elegant as fire, she had been at Richard's side for years, her loyalty unshaken. Yet when she saw the way Daniel lingered, the way Emily grew attached, and the way Richard's steel walls seemed to crack in his presence, Evelyn's suspicions sharpened into knives. She wanted to know who Daniel was, why he appeared, and what secrets he carried. Because Evelyn had secrets of her own. One evening, when the sun bled into the horizon, Daniel and Emily sat on the steps of the garden. She told him stories of her late mother, how she used to sing lullabies under the stars, how her absence carved a hole in her father's heart. Daniel listened quietly, his chest heavy with unspoken words. For he, too, carried a loss. Inside, Richard watched from the window, a whiskey glass in hand. He saw something that unnerved him, the way Daniel looked at Emily with a mixture of protection and sorrow, the way Emily leaned on him like he was the brother she never had. But it wasn't just that. Richard saw the way Daniel avoided his eyes, as though hiding something. And then came the night of the storm. The winds howled against the mansion, rain slashing like blades against the glass. Emily was asleep, her crutch leaning against the wall beside her bed. Richard was in his study, Evelyn at his side, discussing a deal that could either save or destroy them. And Daniel, he should have been gone, yet he lingered in the guest room Richard reluctantly offered. But fate struck again. A scream tore through the mansion. Emily's scream. Daniel was the first to reach her room, his instincts honed by years of danger. He found her trembling, a shadow at her window retreating into the storm. Without hesitation, he grabbed her, shielding her as Richard and Evelyn burst in seconds later. "She's fine," Daniel said breathlessly, holding Emily close. But someone was here. Someone tried to get in. Richard's blood ran cold. He knew what this meant. His enemies were no longer circling, they had arrived. And as the storm raged outside, Richard realized something terrifying. Daniel was not a coincidence. He was either the danger sent to destroy them, or the protector sent by fate itself. The next morning, the air was heavy with suspicion. Guards doubled around the estate. Evelyn moved like a shadow, whispering into her phone with a tone laced in urgency, and Richard's eyes rarely left Daniel. Daniel, however, stayed near Emily, refusing to let her feel the fear that pulsed in the air. She trusted him, and Richard noticed it. Perhaps too much. "Who are you really?" Richard demanded later that day when the two men stood alone in the study. His voice was low, threatening, but beneath it was desperation. "No drifter just happens to be in the right place at the right time, not twice. If you're here to harm my daughter." "I'm not," Daniel interrupted firmly, his eyes locked on Richard's. "But you're right, I'm not just a stranger." Richard's grip on his glass tightened. "Then what are you?" Daniel hesitated, torn between truth and safety. His past wasn't something he could share freely, not with the kind of enemies Richard had, not with the risk of drawing danger closer. But silence was dangerous, too. Before he could answer, Evelyn entered, her eyes sharp, her presence slicing the tension like a knife. "We've confirmed it," she said. "Last night wasn't a coincidence. Richard, they're coming for Emily. They want her as leverage." The words froze the air. Richard's jaw clenched, but his eyes flicked to Daniel. Suspicion deepening. "And you expect me to believe he's not involved?" Evelyn's gaze slid to Daniel, lingering a moment too long. "I don't trust him." Yet Emily, overhearing from the doorway, burst into the room, her voice fierce despite her small frame. "I trust him. He saved me. Twice. Doesn't that mean something?" Her words silenced them all. Days turned into nights, and the threat loomed larger. Anonymous letters, phone calls, shadows at the edge of the estate. The storm hadn't ended, it had only begun. Through it all, Daniel remained, his presence both a shield and a mystery. Richard hated him for the questions he raised, yet couldn't deny the comfort Emily found in him. And then, as fate wove its cruel threads tighter, came the revelation. Evelyn, the woman Richard had trusted with his empire, was not loyal after all. Her whispered phone calls, her two perfect alibis. Daniel uncovered the truth one night, following her into the village where she met with a man cloaked in darkness. She was the traitor, feeding their enemies information in exchange for power. But before Daniel could confront her, Evelyn struck first. She cornered him in the garden under moonlight, a pistol steady in her hand. "You should have left when you had the chance," she hissed. "But you stayed. You made them love you. And now you've ruined everything." Daniel's jaw tightened. "So it's you. You're the reason they came for Emily." "She's the key," Evelyn sneered. "The only thing Richard cares about more than his empire. With her, they control him. And you," her voice lowered, almost trembling, "you were never supposed to be part of this story." The standoff was broken by Emily's voice, small but clear, calling from the balcony above. "Daniel." In that instant of hesitation, Daniel moved. The gun clattered to the ground, Evelyn's plan unraveling as guards stormed the garden. But before she was dragged away, her final words echoed like poison. "This isn't over. You'll never escape who you really are." The days that followed were quieter, but the questions remained. Richard, finally lowering his guard, confronted Daniel one last time. "Tell me the truth. Who are you?" Daniel's eyes softened as he looked at Emily playing in the garden, laughter finally returning to her face. He turned back to Richard. "I was a soldier. I've done things I can't forget. But I left that life behind, hoping for peace. I didn't come here to find this. But maybe I was meant to." Richard studied him for a long time. Then, for the first time, he extended his hand. "Then stay. Not as a stranger. As family." Daniel hesitated, then took it. As the sun set over the estate, painting the sky in hues of fire and gold, Daniel realized something he never thought possible. For years he had run from his past, from the blood on his hands and the ghosts in his mind. But here, with Emily's laughter echoing and Richard's guarded respect softening, he found something worth staying for. And as Emily ran up, her crutch swinging lightly as she hugged his side, Daniel knew the truth: he had not stumbled onto this path by chance. Fate had led him here, into the heart of a family torn by loss and betrayal, to protect them, to love them. But deep down, in the silence of his soul, he also knew Evelyn's words carried a shadow. The past never truly let go. And one day, it would come knocking again. Until then, he would fight, not just for survival, but for love.